With me is Derek Aberle, president of Qualcomm, who's recently actually commissioned a report which was done by the Boston Consulting Group, which looked at how the telecom and the mobility sector can add to growth, overall growth. Derek, a pleasure to have you here. Thanks very much for your time.
Thanks for having me.
I'd like to start by asking you, what are the findings of that report? And specifically with regards to India, what does it tell us?
Sure. Yeah, we obviously make very large investments in the telecom sector and the mobile technologies in particular. And I think it's intuitive to many of us in the industry that mobile technologies are really driving tremendous growth, not only in the industry, but in many other sectors that are adopting mobile technology. So we decided to retain the Boston Consulting Group to do an independent look at this and actually try to put some numbers around it. And the findings were actually pretty remarkable in terms of the value that's not only created by the technology, but then delivered to society both through financial as well as societal benefit. A couple of the findings just generally, and then I'll talk more specifically about India, but the amount of revenue generated from mobile technologies in 2014 was about $3.3 trillion, which is pretty staggering when you think about it. And that is forecast to grow going forward. But also there was about 1.8 trillion of investment put into the sector to really help drive that. And as we look ahead to the challenges ahead in terms of what investments need to be done to drive technology, there's going to be probably over 4 trillion of additional investment needed between now and 2020 to continue to add capacity and build out networks to connect the rest of the population around the world. In India in particular, some pretty interesting findings. Mobile technologies contributed about 2.2% to GDP growth in India. That was slightly lower than a couple other countries that were in the study. We actually looked at 6 countries in total, including China, United States, and Brazil were in that bucket. And you look at the growth, though, in the subscription base in India, and it's been remarkable over the last 10 years. 2004, there was about 50 million subscribers, and now close to about 900 million. So really tremendous growth. Now,
so in terms of, you're saying in terms of subscriber growth, India has actually added on to the fastest pace, one of the fastest paces. But
yes.
In terms of percentage contribution to GDP, we're the lowest, right? Almost at the lowest.
You're on the lower, I think, lower end of the countries that we took
So how
a look
does
at.
these two things fit? I mean, what's the...
I think part of it is that most of the growth that's really happened in India has been around 2G, second generation technology, which is much more voice centric. Right. And as the industry transitions to 3G and now 4G, that's really driving some of the productivity cases and the use cases that take advantage of these higher data rates. Okay. And in many other countries that, for a variety of reasons, but in particular the spectrum availability has probably outpaced that of India in many of these places. So the networks around 3G and 4G have been deployed at a much faster rate, and that's really the engine, that drives a lot of this growth.
Tariffs, do they play a role? I mean, are tariffs here too low, for example? I mean, competitive intensity is very high in India.
Yeah, it's been a very, very competitive market in India, and again, I think the current competition really has been around voice and sort of the lower end data market. And I think there's an opportunity now for the ecosystem really to capture some more value as they migrate to 3G and 4G, because really you're delivering a much more
data, essentially.
Yeah, much more robust user experience. Yeah. And if you look at it, even now in India, on the flip side, was actually one of the higher countries in this particular metric, and that was the percentage of income that people are willing to spend on mobile technologies, and India was actually at 45%, which was at the high end. So it seems to me that there's a very big thirst for mobility in India, and as the networks evolve and the technology supports higher data rates and better capacity, there's a great opportunity there to drive even more productivity in India than many of the other countries.
It's been a couple of years since 3G was introduced in India, right? Yes. And now we're talking about 4G. In your assessment, is the ecosystem ready for 4G? I mean, we have a player which is now actually going to come on stream very soon. But is it ready? The ecosystem is ready?
Yeah, I think you've seen really great strides in the technology over the last 5 years. Obviously, the rollouts first happened in the U.S., but then, pretty quickly after that, many other countries. And then now the ecosystem that's being developed around the rollout of LTE, which is fourth generation technology in China, really provides all the tools needed, to drive this revolution in India. What's I think missing so far is the 3G networks have not been deployed at the same scale as many other countries, primarily because lack of spectrum.
Yes.
I believe if that can be solved in the near term, the 3G networks will quickly roll out, and then LTE will follow on top of that. There are some operators that are talking about moving straight to LTE or 4G, but the dynamics are a little different there, and it's probably a better path for them to deploy 3G and then 4G as well.
I mean, I guess we come back to spectrum availability, right? I mean, here spectrum auctions are going to take place, and while a lot of talk is focused on what's the price of spectrum and is it too high, etc., the quantum of spectrum, I guess, is as important, if not more important, related to the price that companies will eventually pay for the spectrum. What are your thoughts? I mean, there's been a fair bit of back and forth between the regulator and the government about how much spectrum should we really sell.
Right.
What are your thoughts?
Our view is that there's going to be an increasing need for more spectrum, and every place in the world that we've seen spectrum being auctioned, including the current auction going on in the U.S., prices have continued to climb, even when 40 megahertz or more of spectrum has been auctioned in a single auction. So I wouldn't be personally particularly concerned about a 40 megahertz block of spectrum being too much to drive down the value.
Prices,
I think,
yes.
I think the value of spectrum will only increase over time. And really to get the advances we need to drive things like advances in mobile health and education, as well as some of the productivity gains that we're seeing out of this study, there doesn't need to be more spectrum available in India.
I mean, here in India, for example, in the 2100 megahertz band, the government's been willing to put up 5 megahertz, and the regulator's been saying, well, you need at least 15 to 20 megahertz. But so there's a bit of a standoff there. What would your advice be to the government?
I mean, our advice to every government typically is, you should make as much spectrum available as possible. And if you look at even places that have actually auctioned and sold a large amount of spectrum, the operators are still asking for more. And that's because there's just a tremendous data crunch on the networks. Most of the operators are projecting that the amount of data that they'll need to provide in 10 years will be 1,000 times greater than they provide today. So we're working on a number of technologies to help improve efficiency and get more capacity out of each bit of spectrum. But the strategy also needs to be long-term planning and making additional spectrum available. There's no way you're going to be able to connect the number of people that need to get connected to 3G and 4G in India without a lot more spectrum available.
And the quality of that connection, right? I mean, you can get people on, but to be able to sort of drive some of the things that you're talking about, you need the spectrum out there.
Yes, absolutely, and the user experiences are evolving such that people are consuming more and more of their content on a mobile device. I think one of the other statistics that came out of the study was that I think about 72% of users have their primary broadband access over mobile in India. And that makes sense because it's less wired than many other countries. And as you look at a lot of the developing countries around the world, people are getting onto the internet for the first time on a mobile device, and that is their primary mechanism for accessing content. And so you think about how do you really bridge this digital divide between the rural areas and the developed areas, and it's got to be by having more capacity available.
Did the study look at, growth rates and the amount of spectrum which is made available? I mean, that kind of thing, because if you think about it, starting the late 90s when the new telecom policy was put in place, I mean, the growth spurts in a way sort of coincided with more spectrum being made available here, back in India at least. I mean, is that a sort of direct sort of correlation as well, which should be looked upon quite seriously?
I'm not sure how much they directly correlated that, but what they did do is they did a bunch of quantitative studies, and then they reached some conclusions at the end of the report. And one of the conclusions at the end of the report was basically a recommendation to policymakers that control spectrum that effectively you should make more spectrum available for mobile services. And you see the productivity gains in many different areas. Another area they looked at was small and medium-sized enterprises, and they looked at the enterprises that adopted mobile technology vigorously, and then those that had poor adoption. And there was about two times greater revenue growth as well as job creation growth from the companies that really were embracing mobile. So it really goes across from user experience to social benefit to even creating jobs and driving revenue for these small companies that are out there. Yeah.
Great talking to you, Derek. Thanks very much for your time. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.